Before playing through the new expansion for Cyberpunk, I really wanted to return to the vanilla game, see what's been added since launch, particularly the latest patch dubbed 2.0, which adds vehicular combat, a revamped skill system, and updates to the game's disappointing law enforcement AI. Do these changes really make a difference? Well, the game certainly feels more solid than it did 2 years ago. There are far fewer bugs and most of the wonky physics glitches have been addressed. Not once did my car launch itself into the air for no explicable reason. Not one quest failed to complete, a personal peeve of mine, all those quests hanging around in your journal. And load times are very fast, particularly for a game of this size and scope. Honestly, coming to the game off the back of Starfield, which is Bethesda's loading screen simulator essentially, the seamless nature of Night City really shines, and many quality of life issues have been addressed. A walk button was added, for instance. I made a whole video about how the lack of a walk button is really a problem if you're playing on PC that doesn't have the analog controls. And things like healing and grenades, they're now on a timer, they have a cooldown, so you just need to make sure you craft the next upgrade and then you're good to go. You just, how many times you can throw them is dictated by the cooldown rather than having to have stacks and stacks of things in your inventory. It cuts down on inventory management a huge amount. I really can't overstate how much those missions not completing really got under my skin during my first playthrough. At the end, those bugged quests hanging around in your journal, it's like they were bookmarks highlighting how many problems there were with the game. Yes, it was playable from start to finish, and the good elements largely outweighed the bad, but there were just too many of those little annoyances. Quite apart from the bugs, the game also suffered from some inexplicable design decisions. Night City, it's all about style, right? You're constantly bombarded by aspirational ads about improving yourself, yet the game forced you to wear this ridiculously mismatched clothing because armor stats were tied to wearable items. Only now with patch 2.0 has this finally been addressed. I feel like I'm shouting into the wind with this point so many times because so many games do it, but it really impacts my sense of immersion in a game when what my character is wearing is dictated not by personal choice but by some game mechanic, some ridiculous game mechanic. Thank God it's no longer a thing in Cyberpunk. Armor is now tied to cybernetics, which have less of an impact on visual appearance, and actually a lot of defensive stats and bonuses are added with cybernetics now that feel meaningful. But yeah, those customization options being there, it's a welcome change, and unfortunately it took them 2 years to implement it. It's only come in with 2.0, I think. The skill system is much more improved too. There's now a bigger difference in playstyle between a V-spec for body with gorilla arms and a V-spec for ranged combat with quick hacks for crowd control. The knock-on effect is that the missions are much more repeatable now, feeling completely different when approached in different ways. You can do stealth, manipulating the enemy through the crafty use of hacks and environmental objects, or you can barrel in there with an arm rocket launcher and just lobbing grenades all over the place. They say absence makes the heart grow fonder though, and I'm wondering how much of my more positive feeling towards the game now is to do with my tempered expectations after playing the game back then. I think some of it is to do with that, but broadly speaking, it's just a better game with all those updates. I know this because the things that annoyed me are still there. Lots of stuff has been improved, but the annoyances still annoy me. But I don't come away gritting my teeth the way I did because I've fallen through the floor. That doesn't happen anymore. But driving is still a pain, for instance. They have made improvements. It's not as bad as it was, but it's still a pain. And you have to hot swap to a controller if you want to avoid the horrendous oversteer on PC. There's a sensitivity slider, but it really doesn't help. Like I say though, I can live with that. Now I've got plenty of customization options, an AI that isn't glitchy or brain dead, and an interesting progression system. I feel more invested, which in turn makes me want to engage with Cyberpunk's best element, which are the storylines. These are top notch, and even though some of the narratives fail to resolve satisfactorily, the writing and performance, they kept me engaged throughout. My biggest gripe still persists though, and I must mention it, the world never feels as convincing as it should. The devs were very open about their intentions from the start with Cyberpunk, perhaps too open, which led to people expecting too much myself among them. And even though I know what the game is now, there's still a sense of lingering disappointment that some of the development goals weren't achieved. Cyberpunk is a strong, narratively driven RPG with a unique setting, but those mission statements from the devs, those work in progress videos, they left me expecting much more. And the thought of what could have been is still floating around at the back of my mind. Not unreasonable things, there were things they were shooting for that didn't get implemented, and okay, things changed during game development, but I saw those things, and I was thinking about those things, and I know those things are not in the game.
A big part of our RPG experience is having a world that is interactive. Here, a generic ad has morphed into an advertisement specifically tailored to V, informing her of the nearest vendor she can purchase the product. In this case, it shows us where to find some Nicola soda.
One of the things they talked about was trying to create this sense of a breathing, living world with Night City. But the denizens of Night City don't really have that. They kind of wander the streets, unless they're a named character, something from a quest, or something that's kind of tailored, a tailored incident that triggers once the player gets near. They don't really do anything beyond the police, which are much improved in 2.0 with Max Tac, the city's elite SWAT type units finally showing up when you go on too much of a murderous rampage. This isn't a simulation, and that's okay, as long as you don't look too closely. It all seems real enough. There are these little vignettes of activity, but they're generally frozen moments like digital dioramas. The Afterlife bar is a good example. Inspect the patrons for a minute and you'll see you're surrounded by these mannequins. None of them will ever move on, progress from this frozen moment. It's fitting for the game's dystopian setting, I suppose, but I can't help feeling a little disappointed that the people who live in Night City and that living idea of a living, breathing world that the devs talked about never really materialized with the game. You might stumble across two gangs in the midst of a battle, which is a recent addition. They can be on foot or in vehicles now, which is nice. It's kind of to race past you shooting at one another. But yeah, everyone else is just endlessly circling the streets of Night City. To expect more is perhaps unreasonable, and it's such a huge environment, but it seems to me that other open world games like Red Dead 2 or even CD Projekt's own The Witcher 3 do a better job of hiding the limitations of the world that you are playing in. They do a better job of convincing the player to suspend disbelief, I guess. I need to stop talking about what I'd hoped the game would be though. Upon my return, I really did make a concerted effort to appreciate what the game is. The story and characters are what stand out for me. There's some genuinely intriguing people to meet and meaty themes to explore: personal liberty versus community responsibility, media manipulation, corporate greed, the perils of an over-dependence on technology and the dehumanizing effect that can have. Unlike a lot of games, Cyberpunk 2077 not only has a plot, it seems to be trying to make some points, and that's appreciated. Several, in fact, if you're interested in looking for them. What the game is about will vary from person to person. For me, it's all about how much of our humanity we're willing to sacrifice in the pursuit of wealth and prestige and beauty and improvement of the self. The answer to this question will dictate your choices and the ending you'll ultimately experience, of which there are several, all of them very unique and interesting. They make you think. The game's reflective, with V and Johnny Silverhand taking time out to discuss what's happening to them, what motivates those around them. It's not forced. It grows organically out of the situation that they find themselves in, and Keanu Reeves almost ends up filling the role of that character in a Shakespeare play who makes asides to the audience, filling them in on things, or almost a foul-mouthed Greek chorus. It can all get pretty philosophical at times and introspective. There are several missions that simply require you to meet someone and have a chat, have a coffee. These missions will either engage you or annoy you depending upon what you want from this type of game, but personally I found them a breath of fresh air. Take your time and you'll enjoy this more leisurely approach, character-driven pace. Start to rush and you'll no doubt get frustrated with those extended dialogue scenes and Johnny's musings on the human condition. It's all going to depend on you, the player, how you react to this stuff. Those big topics and intricate characters would be beyond the game's reach if it weren't for the excellent animation and voice acting. There are these moments where Johnny reacts in the background to what's going on, or Judy casts a furtive glance in V's direction. They're wonderful, subtle details that reward the player for paying close attention, and frankly, such detail is beyond the scope of most games, or the inclination of most games. You have to have a real insight and desire to go deep on things to add those little incidental details that just sell the believability of these characters in this world. The animation is so good sometimes I'm not sure if I'm imagining it. Check out this moment here where Judy smiles. I am sure she smiles when V compliments her, but it's so subtle. See what you think.
Lucky for me, I'm running around with the best BD specialist in town. That's an extra pair of expert eyes. Well, as I say, I haven't played through the expansion yet, Phantom Liberty. I'll be doing that in a separate review, but there's definitely a sense of melancholy as you approach level 50 in the base game, and all that's left on the map are simple fixer gigs. All the interesting characters fall away and you're left with this creeping sense of emptiness as the spark kind of goes out on Night City. I don't know what could be done about this. No single player game lasts forever after all, but it's perhaps the most obvious example of how Cyberpunk falls short for me. I can't put my finger on it exactly, but taking the closest game I can think of as an example, GTA 5, for some reason I still want to go into that game and experience the world after completing the story content. I'm not talking about GTA Online, by the way. I mean the single-player world after Michael and co walk off into the sunset. To this day, I still drive around Los Santos, listening to the radio, robbing the odd convenience store, or attempting stunt jumps for fun. Night City, on the other hand, seems to me to have very little to offer once that main story and the side quests, the more fleshed out side quests, are done with. I wouldn't even be mentioning this if it weren't for the fact that the game has this vast open world, and it always hints at emergent gameplay possibilities that are never really explored. Sometimes I think the Cyberpunk we got in the end would benefit from a more limited game space. Maybe that would have complemented the narrative a lot better. My expectations were too high, I admit it, but the game's world still presents tantalizing possibilities. How about pickpockets who randomly steal from other NPCs, or pedestrians getting mown down by a hit and run driver which triggers a police chase, or the drunken lout who punches someone randomly, sending people off panicking through the streets. Very little seems to happen that doesn't involve the player, apart from the inter-gang strife and warfare between those, and which sometimes involves the police. But usually, if the police get involved, it's as a result of something you'll be doing. It's usually the player that triggers events within the city. I mean, that's always the case in single-player games. Nothing happens independently of the player, but there are things that can trigger with the AI to create the illusion of life beyond you yourself as you play, which are just not there in Night City, and I think it's a missed opportunity. Or really just going back to basics like collectibles hidden throughout the city. There's some amazing vertical areas that there's really no reason to visit after the story mission that takes place there has been done. That would give you a reason to return. Stunt jumps like in GTA, some parkour challenges to give you an incentive to explore the heights of the buildings a little bit more, or something like that, to give the city something a little bit more that makes it worth exploring. I don't know. So definitely play Cyberpunk if you love dystopian future settings, sophisticated storylines, and complex characters. The graphics, they can be truly experienced now the bugs have been squashed, and visually Night City is a marvel. It's corruption on a grand scale. It's terrifyingly beautiful future. Getting all poetical now. Don't go in like me expecting a more open environment with more sandboxy elements. You'll enjoy it thoroughly if you don't expect too much. The game is where it should have been at release, one of the best single player RPGs available on the market in 2023, and well worth your time.
I'll be heading into the expansion next, so I hope you'll sub up and join me for that. Thank you for watching. I've been Napyet, and I'll see you next time.